Hi, this is Boki, and today for Not My Thesis, I wanted to do something that I feel like is kind of at the intersection of what this channel is, which is like half me talking about books I've read and half me talking about my existential crisis about what will happen when I'm done with grad school. I'm sort of getting more and more interested in thinking about careers in science writing and science communication. And the thing is, science writing / communication is really a vast umbrella term that covers a wide range of jobs, like, writing for newspapers, editing journals, helping people write grants, helping universities put out press releases. And there's this idea that gets talked about a lot, and I did this a little bit too, this idea that scientists aren't good at talking to the public. And I mentioned this in my AAAS video, but I think there's really more complexity to that. I think there are plenty of scientists who do like talking about their research to the public. I think the problem is more that the training that we get in grad school really mostly prepares us to talk about our science with people in our field, and maybe the field next door, but not really much further away from that. Even in my program, where all the students are biomedical engineering PhD students, hearing talks from people in other labs can make you feel like you need subtitles. And like, we took the same classes, we have the same vocabulary, we just use these words in different ways that makes understanding each other's work that much more confusing. On top of that, our grad school training really makes us obsess over details that become really, really unproductive if you want to talk about your work to the public. When I think about what I spent most of my time working on over the past 5 years, that is not actually the thing that I would spend most of my time talking to people about if I were trying to explain what I'm doing. Those details are boring, and more importantly, they don't actually convey what the overall thing that I am trying to achieve is. But cutting those details out is so hard, because I think at the core of every grad student, all we want is for someone to validate how hard we're working and how hard our project is. And so telling people about these mundane experiments that we repeated like 20 times until we finally figured out that small, stupid detail that made it all come together, like, we just want to tell everybody that, even if most people aren't really gonna get much from that story. It's really hard to kind of implement the self-control to remember, like, dial it back. What's the bigger picture of what I'm working on? Like, what am I doing that is actually important to the person that I'm talking to? I don't know if you can tell based on the fact that I have a YouTube channel, but I like to talk. I also love writing and I love science, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how to best combine all of these things that I love doing into a career that is meaningful and viable for me. This channel, and particularly this series, I think has been really like a good starting point for me to kind of think more about what it is that I want to convey to people outside of science and how it is that I want to do that. But the world of science writing and communication is still so vast and overwhelming and kind of intimidating, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out what my place in it will be. So I have been doing what grad school trained me to do, which is read up on the literature. So today I wanted to talk about 4 books that I've read in the past few weeks to kind of get a better idea about how to either talk about science more effectively or to how to pursue careers in science communication. So the first book I'm going to talk about is a little bit different from the other 3, and this is Better Presentations by Jonathan Schwabish. This book is basically about the bane of everyone's existence, not just scientists, and this is PowerPoint presentations. And we all learn how to give a not terrible presentation. Like, we learn, like, don't overwhelm your slides with text, don't read off of your slides. All of this advice on how to give a not terrible presentation, I feel like I didn't necessarily get a lot of good, solid advice on how to give good presentations. Like, how do you get people to actually want to look at your slides and get information off of them? The book is a helpful breakdown of basic concepts related to color theory and type that might be familiar to people who have maybe a really in-depth knowledge of graphic design, but as someone who doesn't really know that much more than, like, complementary colors exist. What was really helpful is that this book has example slides that kind of show how small changes in design really change your understanding of the material. I will say that there is some advice in this book I disagreed with, but I think that those are kind of really small quibbles, and that overall this book lays out a really nice philosophy with really, like, practical, actionable kind of advice to build a better presentation. So the last 3 books I want to talk about are much more specifically about science writing. And so I'm going to start with Science Blogging, which is basically made up of a series of chapters written by people who have done different types of science blogging. This book was edited by Christie Wilcox, Bethany Brookshire, and Jason G. Goldman. Like I mentioned, these chapters are written by people who have been involved in science blogging in different ways, but really these people also cover a wide spectrum of careers. There's science journalist Ed Yong, who writes for The Atlantic, as well as postdoc Dr. Danielle Lee, who blogs for The Urban Scientist at Scientific American. These chapters cover basic how-tos like deciding on a platform, as well as bigger picture kind of topics like how to cover controversial topics in science. I think some of the content will be familiar if you've ever done a basic Google search on, say, how to start a blog or how to start a YouTube channel. But what's nice is really having them kind of compiled in one easy to grab resource that also filters the advice through a scientific lens. One of the things that I also liked is that this book sort of gives kind of history of science blogging, so if you like that kind of thing, I think it's kind of neat to have. So next up is the Science Writer's Essay Handbook, written by Michelle Nijhuis. This book is a guide to writing science in essay form, both the research and writing that goes into it, as well as pitching your work and dealing with the editing process. It's a fairly short book, but it packs a lot of information on what constitutes an essay and what makes for a good one. This is really kind of dumb and embarrassing on my part because, like everyone, I have written essays since elementary, middle school, I've done the hamburger essay thing. But somehow I didn't really ever put that much thought into what constitutes a science essay versus a news article about science. And so this book gave me a lot more specificity in what I'm reading, so to better understand kind of what different writers are trying to do based on the type of writing that they're doing. Niehaus provides a lot of examples for the different approaches writers take to the science essay, and it gave me a lot of appreciation for the craft of essay writing in general. Last up is the Science Writer's Handbook, edited by Thomas Hayden and Michelle Nijhuis. This book is like science blogging in that each of the chapters is written by different science writers about science writing. This book is so dense. I feel like it's one of those books that you read once, you read twice, and then you basically put tabs all over it and you save it as a resource that you always turn to at least once a month because it just has so much practical information. There's things like the basics of how to pitch an article or how to conduct an interview. Then there are other things like how to balance your time and how to maintain healthy boundaries with your family. And then there are even kind of emotional topics like how to deal with professional jealousy. Even if you're not sure that you want to be a science writer, I feel like the advice in this is just so good for any career, and because it's written by science writers, it's even better because they're really good at writing. I feel like the advice on how to handle rejections is advice that I'll probably have to implement at least a whole bunch of times in my future. Something that all of these last 3 books gave me is kind of a better sense of the scope of what science writing is. So while it still seems vast, the list of writers used as examples in these books, as well as the list of contributors, has given me a better idea of people whose work I want to learn more about. I'd recommend any of these books for people who are considering science writing as a career, either as their primary career or something they want to do alongside, say, their research. Something else I wanted to mention. If you are interested in science writing, I recommend joining the National Association of Science Writers. I just joined this past year. Alongside their kind of normal membership, they do a student membership. In the mail kind of this last week, I got some issues of their Science Writers magazine that I'm really excited to go through. It seems like it's an organization that's really helpful for kind of building a network, as well as getting access to different writing, as well as different events. So I will link to their website below. So thank you for watching. If you have a favorite science writer who you always love hearing from, or someone who talks about science, whether it's Bill Nye or, in my case, Miss Frizzle from Magic School Bus, let me know below. If you want to talk more about books or science or grad school, you can follow me on Twitter at okidokiboki. And yeah, bye.